Today my topic is on the causes of the War of 1812. President James Madison listed the causes of the war as a violation of the rights of a neutral country, and Great Britain restricting its trade with France, impressment of men into the British Navy, and the incitement of natives on the frontier. Historians have also advanced other such causes, such as expansion, a depression in agriculture, war hawks in Congress, and a growing sense of patriotism. The first article I read is 1812, Conservatives, War Hawks, and the Nation's Honor by Norman K. Resurgent, and he utilized various primary sources, including letters, speeches, newspapers, and official documents. His overall thesis is that we cannot rely on material causes of the war alone, such as economic problems or land grabs, but that the war was essentially brought on to prevent the dishonor of subjecting its neutral sovereignty to Great Britain's trade restrictions. One question that is often raised is why America waited until 1812 to declare war when those trade restrictions were enacted by Great Britain 5 years earlier in 1807. And the simple answer to that is that they viewed war as a last resort. They had already tried their own trade embargo on Great Britain, and they found that that really didn't work. He makes some important points, such as on the territorial cause, which says Americans sought to claim Canada for itself. He notes that 39 of the 79 votes, or nearly half of the yes votes for the war, came from the South, where they were not only indifferent to that prospect, but actually opposed to it. And the U.S. had virtually all the unsettled land it needed in the Louisiana Territory. Most scholars agree that the invasion of Canada was a means of fighting the war and forcing Great Britain to give up its trade restrictions on America, and not as the ultimate objective in of itself. The Speaker of the House and principal advocate for the invasion of Canada, Henry Clay, said, "When the war was commenced, Canada was not the end but the means. The object of the war being the redress of injuries, and Canada being the instrument by which that redress was to be obtained." And on the economic cause, which saw a downturn in certain agricultural prices, such as cotton, he says that doesn't explain why Pennsylvania, which saw its beef, corn, and flour prices remain stable, and they actually voted 16-2 in favor of the war. The second article I read is James Madison and the Malcontents, the Political Origins of the War of 1812 by J.C.A. Stagg. And he isn't so much interested in the direct causes of the war, but how those causes got turned into a declaration of war through political action. The sources he used were similar to the first article, such as letters, speeches, and newspapers, but I saw he also used minutes from meetings as well. He contends that President Madison was the central or guiding figure to bringing that war about, and eventually was able to unite Republicans in supporting the war. This was a major task since traditional Republicans favored a limited federal government with only a small army and navy. Even when war was declared, they didn't expand the size of the army and navy in order to wage it, and they didn't raise taxes in order to fund it. The last two articles I read included The Causes of the War of 1812, 200 Years of Debate by Jasper M. Trausch, and The Origins of the War of 1812, Causes, Reinterpretations, and Ruminations by Harold W. Youmans. Both of these look at the historiography of the causes of the war and how different historians have generated various interpretations over time. In light of this, their sources are mostly secondary in nature, including scholarly books and journals. Youmans' main point was that wars rarely have a single cause, but they usually encompass several different causes. Trausch's overall thesis is that there wasn't a sectional divide between Western and Southerners versus Northerners, but a political divide between Republicans and Federalists. Although New England prompted the American Revolution, it really didn't want a second war with Great Britain. There were even Republican fears that New England would succeed and ally itself with Great Britain. But even here, Massachusetts produced 6 votes for the war, and only 3 other states produced more than that. As it turned out, though, 83% of Republicans in the House and 73% of Republicans in the Senate voted for the war, but not one Federalist voted for it. Another important point that Trausch makes is that they had to communicate by letters at that time, which took months to move over the Atlantic Ocean. The Americans, for instance, didn't know that the main cause of the war, the Order in Council, which restricted American trade with France, was suspended before they had already declared war. And then, after they made peace in December of 1814, Andrew Jackson fought and won the Battle of New Orleans in January of 1815. So in conclusion, we see that the War of 1812 had multiple causes, but some of those are more prominent than others, such as those listed by James Madison himself.